we want to find ways that we can get more money per transaction. We want that customer to come back more and spend more each time. And then lastly, we want them to tell everybody how great we are.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Welcome to Biz Help for You with Candy Messer. Today's episode is going to teach you how small strategic changes can create exponential growth, turning your business into a profit machine without being overwhelmed by complexity or resource constraints. You're not going to want to miss it. So, Brad, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I want to first find out a little bit about you. So can you just tell us a few little bits and pieces about your life that are going to show us why you're an expert in this field?
Oh, goodness. Well, I am a recovering corporate flunky, for lack of a better word. For 32 years, I spent in corporate America. Started sort of at the bottom of customer-facing jobs, so sales, which led into sales leadership, that led into marketing and onwards. Over that time, I've owned a business. I was partnered with two other people, which I don't recommend. Three's a crowd. And after about 32 years, I was in the printing space, and that has evolved over time. And there was a fork in the road for me. Turn right, and I could continue doing sort of what I was doing, or turn left, and I could sign a piece of paper, and I was free to go. So I chose to turn left and start a coaching practice. The main reason why I wanted to start a coaching practice is, as I looked back over my career, the most impactful things that business-wise that happened, I could directly correlate to having a coach or a mentor in my life. And so I felt like that's what I wanted to do for other people. So started a coaching practice, and just been growing and scaling from there. And today's topic is really, really appropriate for the way that I coach and the way that my clients have seen value.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know we're going to be talking about how to improve, profitability. I know that's a top concern for so many entrepreneurs, and cash flow obviously is important too, but making sure that we're profitable is, one of those way up at the top. So I would love for you just to, touch on a little bit to your phrase, magic of compounding action. Like, what does that really mean? And how does that affect profitability?
So that is a great question, and I could take 20 minutes to answer. There's a lot of interconnected parts, but let's start at the very beginning. The word compounding is an important word in that statement. And just like compounding interest, your listeners will nod their head and say, yes, if we put money in the bank and we get a return that compounds, so $1 gets 10%, or $10 gets 10% interest, you have $11. Now, the next time it compounds, you're compounding $11 instead of $10. So over a period of time, little efforts made consistently create this wealth. And the same is true, I have found, in any time that you want to make a change. I feel so often in that when and I'm speaking from personal experience, when I want to make a change, I see the other side and it becomes this enormous thing. I have to get there in one motion.
Mm-hmm.
And that ends up leading to people burning out. I'm going to walk. That ends up to people burning out. That leads to people not making their goals. And I had to find a better way for me. And so the idea of compounding was something that just resonated. And I found out kind of through trial and error that if I look at things in small pieces, I can get to the end much faster and with more hair.
So are you talking about like compounding actions then, like you do this first step, and when you accomplish that, then the next step is not just accomplishing that small little step, but it's actually making a greater achievement because you've added it on top of the first one. And then that's going to affect overall the financial picture that you have in your business.
Yeah, Candy, that's exactly right. So it's compounding in more than just one way, as I think about it. In a linear fashion, if I'm 1% better today at whatever it is I want to be better at, then tomorrow, if I'm 1% better, I'm at a higher starting point. Right? That's kind of looking at it in the weeds. But if we zoom out and we start thinking about the organization. So let's say I'm a business owner and I need more profitability. I'm working 80 hours a week. My top line feels like it's growing, but my bottom line isn't. The first thing I would do with that owner is zoom out and say, what are those things that you're doing that are revenue generating tasks, right? That would be a starting point for us, because without going down the side road, we know that business owners, especially those beginning entrepreneurs, end up doing everything. And everything doesn't directly lead to revenue nor success. So I'd have them zoom out. What are those things that they do that directly impacts revenue or profit, right? We'll talk about profit. And once we do that, we kind of figure out the 80-20, which is what are the 20% of things I do that move the needle, in this case, the profit needle, 80%. Once we've identified that, then those are the things that we're focusing on improving incrementally. Because if we don't focus on that, then we're improving that whole slice of the pie, but we already know that's not moving the needle effectively, right? So we have to find out what are those things. So depending on the type of business, then we'll get into more specifics about is it offer related? Can we make changes to your offer that's going to directly impact your profit? Your pricing structure. Is there an opportunity to raise pricing to a level that's not going to erode your client base so much that now it's working against you? And I think statistically, when you go through this exercise, most small business owners are a little surprised to see, gosh, I should have raised my prices a while ago. And so that's sort of the beginning part, and ask questions. Let's dive deep into any aspect of that.
Well, one of the things I was thinking of when you were talking was where you talked about the 80-20 and what's the 20% that's going to move your business, that 80%. A lot of people listening might not know what that even is. So if you're trying to say, us kind of look at everything and figure out what that is, if they're not even sure, can you guide them to determine what is that 20% that they really should be focusing on?
Yeah, I think this is one of those exercises that I do with coaching clients early on, and it's a back and forth dialogue, because to your point, the first pass is typically just assumptions they make without really any thought. Like,
Mhm.
these are the things that an entrepreneur should do, so I'm going to write them down.
Mhm.
But I'll give you an example. A business owner that is focused on going to the print shop to get the banner printed in the right color, regardless of the type of business, isn't a great use of their time.
Mhm.
It may feel like it. And let's acknowledge the truth. I mean, an early stage entrepreneur has more time typically than resources.
Mhm.
And so they're trading their time instead of paying out money. But that ends up being a fool's game, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Mhm.
But I would say, if this idea of 80/20 is new to you, for a week, get a journal and write down the activities that you do
Mhm.
with no expectations of what that'll show. And then after that, I want you to kind of categorize them. These are things that are sort of operational. These are customer facing. These are financial, and whatever else relates to your business. And then once you have these buckets, you can now look at those and say, objectively,
Mhm.
is this category even moving the needle? And if it is, which of these things that I do tend to move it the most? I mean, we can overthink this, and I don't want your listeners to overthink it, but simply put, that exercise is tremendously valuable just
Mhm.
as an entrepreneur. What do you do? What categories do they sort of fall in? And then now step back and look at that and see what you learn.
Mhm. Well, especially because people think they know how much time they spend on things and they really don't. Like, they might think, it only takes me a few minutes to do, checking social media, whatever. And then if they really track it, they might be like, wow, I spent 45 minutes there that I thought it was only a few minutes. And so I think it's
Right.
eye-opening too, because it really can identify, where is your time really going? And like you said, is that an effective use of your time? Is it really going to make a difference in, the profit and the revenue that you're getting in your business? So I highly recommend that too. So, um,
Yeah, that's great.
so for someone who maybe just wants to get a quick win right away and says, well, I understand the time tracking and I will do that. And I understand kind of the overview and really like figuring that out, but I don't have, the time this week, but I want to find something I could quickly do to start changing things to increase my profit. Do you have a recommendation?
Yeah, sort of agnostically, right? We're not thinking about industry, or if you're a service business or a manufacturer. Um, the goal as a business owner to be more profitable, there's two basic courses. We can reduce our expenses, or we can increase the revenue side, right? I don't want to get into reduce our expenses. That's for this conversation. I think that gets very technical, and
Mhm.
I'd love to come back one day and maybe we can do that. But on the top line, we want to find ways that we can get more money per transaction. We want that customer to come back more and spend more each time. And then lastly, we want them to tell everybody how great we are,
Mhm.
right? So we leverage the sort of organic growth. So if we look at just one piece of that and say, how do we increase, I'll call it ticket value. How do we increase the transaction value? One of the best ways to do it that I've found, regardless if you're selling a product or a service, is bundling, is taking something, adding something else to it, and then now presenting that. Now, 2 footnotes. You just can't, if I'm an accountant and I want to throw in toothpaste, well, that's not really going to work, right? So it has to be relative to your audience and to your customers, and it has to be valuable. So that's one thing. And then what I tend to see is people realize that 1 + 1 doesn't necessarily equal 2. If you are strategic about what you're putting together, it could equal 2.3 or 2.2 or something other than that. And that translates into profit. So an example, if I am a CPA and I have a tax prep service, and we'll just, for conversation, we'll just say, maybe that's something I charge $1,000 for. Someone comes in, they want tax prep. I charge them $1,000. They're out the door, and I don't see them again until next year. If I had a bundling strategy and I knew I wanted them to spend a little bit more each time, and if I could see them more than just once a year, so I might throw in an estate planning review, right? And again, not thinking about costs or what your time's worth or anything like that. But to me, if I'm the consumer and I know I'm going to pay you $1,000 and that's going to take care of my taxes, but at the time of purchase, you tell me that for $250 more, I can spend another session with you and have you review my estate planning's tax strategy overall. Wow. I mean, that's a lot of things happen, right? The customer is already in that buying frame of mind. They're more likely to supersize that fry at the time of purchase. And now I've gotten another point of contact with them throughout the year. It gives me another opportunity to add value and foster that relationship. So bundling, if done strategically, can do so many things that ultimately lead to moving that profit needle.
Well, earlier too, you talked about how entrepreneurs often have more time than resources, but we know too, when you start a business, often you wear all the hats and you work way more hours than you thought you would, right? And so if someone is now thinking, well, I do need to offload some things and hire some help, but then that's going to actually negatively affect, my profit because now I'm spending more. Like, do you want to really touch on that? Like, how can that mindset be incorrect and what can we do to actually flip that around? So by offloading, you're actually able to increase your profit.
Yeah. There is realistically, from my perspective, a period of time that when you implement any strategy, there's sort of this weighing period where, okay, you start to do it, it starts getting traction, and then it starts to take off. So in this case, if I'm a entrepreneur and I go, okay, I'm listening to Candy, it makes sense. I need to offload some of these low value things. I'm going to hire a VA or someone from my local community. But that's going to free me up, say 10 hours a week, but it's going to cost me $100 a week. Again, just making up numbers. That 10 hours, I'm not going to be able to instantly turn that into revenue activity. So there's going to be a deficit for a little while. And I think from a mindset standpoint, we have to think about investment. So those dollars that you're spending to offload is an investment. The return isn't going to come tomorrow. The return is going to come hopefully very nearly after the thing starts to get traction. I think that mind shift has to happen. Otherwise, you're going to find an entrepreneur really just frozen. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, because obviously it does cost more upfront. You're paying someone, you're having to train them. It takes longer to get it done at first, right? But in the long run, if you're investing your time and, training into that person and they're able to take that off your plate and free up your time, now you have the time to do those higher level things that will generate more revenue for you, right? Yeah, it's just that catch-22 at first, right? Like yes, you're going to spend more, you're going to have less profitability, but in the long run, it is going to free up your time, but you have to be willing to do that, right? And invest now and then see the benefit later.
So one other point on that is you're absolutely right, but take it a step further is once you make that commitment to make that investment, don't waste that 10 hours you just freed up. Have a plan, have a direction of how you're going to use that free time now that you've just paid for. The last thing you want to do is, do more of those low value tasks in that 10 hours. And then, 2 months go by and you go, this is stupid. It doesn't work. Well, have a plan, right? And that's why we start with what do you do? Categorize it, what moves the needle, let's focus on those.
So if someone then is saying, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying, I'm going to start implementing these changes, how long should it really take for someone to see some type of profit improvement after they start implementing some of these strategies?
That's sort of a loaded question because it depends so much on what you're doing, where you're starting from, what's that gap. But early on, when you go to make a change, let's go back to that compounding effort. The 1%, you may not even notice that. 1% compounding on 1%, maybe you notice it a little bit. But then the idea is in a period of time, and I know that's what your question is getting at, so I'll see if I can circle back to it. But the idea is compounding takes a little bit of time. Now, what to choose, I think ultimately is if you had if I'm coaching you, if you're my client and we're looking at your business, we're going to identify, call it low-hanging fruit, those things that you can attack that'll have the shortest amount of time to profit. And that could be bundling, that could be increasing your prices tends to affect the bottom line quickly because it starts the very next transaction. Joint ventures, referral partners, all of these are strategies that might bear fruit right away, but it just really depends. I mean, those are sort of building strategies. There's about 30 that if we were coaching together, that we would go through your business and we would identify which of those would be considered low hanging. And together with you, the business owner, decide which ones make sense to put energy towards. There's an illustration that kind of, I think, sums this up nicely. I don't know if it's a proverb or what, but two kids and their father gives them a choice. You can either have $1 million right now, or I'll give you a magic purse that has a penny. And every day, what's in the purse doubles.
Mhm.
Which do you choose? Well, the son goes, I want the $1 million. I want to go get a Ferrari.
Mhm.
Okay, so he does. The daughter gets the purse. Well, at 30 days, the son's maybe got half of that $1 million because he blew it. The daughter, his sister, has over $5 million, right? At some point, these strategies take action and they start gripping and you start getting these benefits, and then
Mhm.
it just skyrockets. It really does. But you have to be intentional and you have to choose the right things.
Mhm. And like I said, sometimes you just have to be a little bit patient. It's not going to happen overnight. And,
Right.
just keep on investing, that time into the thing that, if it's definitely something that's going to impact, right? But a lot of times people might think, well, I made this change, I'm not seeing the numbers, right?
Right. Well, the two things that they can do that will have an impact immediately are reducing costs or raising your prices.
Mhm.
Right. Reducing your costs have a little bit of a lag time, but raising your prices, the next time Brad goes to get a 10 count chicken nugget meal, if it's 10% higher, that business just,
Mhm.
it's an instant strategy. Um, and that's not a bad place to start and
Mhm.
look, but there are other questions that business owner needs to ask themselves and they need to think about before just blindly
Mhm.
raising prices. But that could be a low hanging fruit that they could pull. I remember when I owned my business, I was always afraid to raise prices. I just in this hysteria of my customers, it's highly competitive. We bid every project. There's no way they're going to take a 10% increase.
Mhm.
Um, and you'd be surprised. You'd be really surprised if you're offering value.
Mhm. Right. Well, I know we are coming close to the end of the time that we have together, so I wanted to ask if you have an offer that you would like to extend to our listeners, and if they want to touch base with you, how can they contact you?
I do on my website. So the website is Foresight Coach, and that's the number 4, SIGHT coach.com. If you go to the freebies, there's a link to freebies, and there's a few books that I have in there. If you're having an issue getting stuff done, there's an offer, a free offer for help there. It's a free offer if you're a manager and you're leading a team. There's some resources there for you. That would be the best way to get in touch with me is foresightcoach.com. Go to the freebie section for some really wonderful things that are easy to implement, and you'll find value.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Brad, for being a guest on my show. I really appreciate your taking the time out to have this conversation with me.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Sure. And to the listener, if you enjoyed today's topic and you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.